he's describing some story, I think with like Ulysses Grant, like some people, he's like, they weren't woke dudes. And so you have to consider what kind of leader would intentionally engage and willingly engage and use such loaded language, right? Woke means to be awake. So for him to engage in some different ulterior meaning of it kind of shows his intention of wanting to rile up some sort of cultural warfare, cultural tensions. Because he knows that there are some people that like what the word woke means, and there are some people that don't like what the word woke means. And for two different sets of people, that brings two different things in mind. And if there is a chance that you can have a massive amount of people believing and arguing about two different things in chaos and divide, he is stronger as a leader. I think we want our leaders to be diplomatic. All right, about 15 minutes in, Joe stopped them from the weave. He sensed that the weave was happening. Trump was about to just talk about, well, I don't even know. He was really at a point of rambling, and then Joe was like, "Oh, what? No, I want to know what it was like inside the White House for the first day." And then Trump really, actually, like, honestly answered. His answers in this whole section just kind of really show me that this is a normal human person who really became a president. And when I say normal human person, I mean someone that wasn't involved in politics. He says it himself. He says, "I was a New York builder." He really does see himself and understands himself as a New York City real estate person, which, if you guys know anybody who lives in New York City that does real estate, you really don't have to be a genius to do it. So here's an important thing here. He's admitting he didn't know who to hire. He didn't know what this was like. And is that really someone we want running the country? This is someone who admits now he did not know what he was signing himself up for. 17 minutes in, he's talking about the landscape, the political landscape, and how he had a perception and how he thought about entering strategically politics, right? He was a Democrat in the 90s. He was a donor for both sides very often. He played both sides. He didn't know who he wanted to align with. There was someone who he said, I'm not going to name, tried to go the independent route with all of his money and just got eaten alive. So in Trump's mind, he realizes it's a two-party system, so you have to align with one of two ideologies. Well, we all know the Democrats, lots of money. This is all very true. Soros, NBC, trillions and trillions of dollars we're talking about. And the Republicans kind of play as like the small market team if you talk about the NBA, right? They like hold up all their draft picks. They're real homegrown. They like win the small games. They just want to fill the seats. Very much true. Most of the red states are lower population, lower income. A lot of the Democrat states are the cities, have higher income, have higher population. So in general, a lot more of America are Democrats, and a lot more money is in the Democratic Party. So Trump has the idea that he can be a big fish in a small pond. Cool. 22 minutes in, I don't understand how everybody understands that the biggest problems with the world are businessmen, yet they advocate for this man. He's telling you just the pathology of his thought is just so business oriented. The way he characterizes and archetypes people as stiffs, stooges, this or that, taking risks as a matter of just getting to a place and not having any context of why you don't take risks in certain areas, and why incrementalism has been embedded into this political system so deeply, why we have politicians vetted for so many years so you can make sure you're getting the right people for the job. I mean, just look how he looks at the opportunity to fill the Supreme Court justice seat. You got to put in somebody young so they're there for 50 years. I mean, what kind of thinking is that? I mean, how is this not the antithesis of both what we think is wrong with this country and what we know is against the Constitution? 33 minutes in, this isn't talking about Kamala Harris's 60 Minutes interview. He describes that moment as voting interference, voter interference, election interference. The way this man embellishes is instinctually in casual conversation makes me fear for how he talks in an office space at work as the president. 45 minutes in, this part is really important. Federal income tax, tariffs. He's mentioned this before about 100% tariffs and tariffs here and tariffs there. Let me quickly explain to you why tariffs would not work. To be able to do 100% tariffs, you have to be able to have the security to say that we don't need imports and exports coming in and going out of America. Now, when it comes to imports, obviously countries like China are probably not going to and probably aren't able to pay 100% tariffs or anything anywhere close to a number like that. So we won't be able to get t-shirts, for example. Do we have the means in America to be able to make t-shirts to supply for 300, 400 million Americans of all different sizes? I'll tell you the short answer, we do not. A friend of mine and I, we used to run a streetwear company. Eventually, we got to a point where we were looking into getting our own shirts manufactured, cut and sew shirts. The first place you go is China, but we wanted to be able to say that you could get something made in United States. And it turns out there are like a handful of cotton mills, farms that actually, or factories that actually sew the garments together, that dye the fabric, that twill the fabric itself. You'd think we would, but we aren't set up for that. We aren't set up for that in the short term. We aren't set up for that in the long term. It would honestly take many years of us getting the farmland to grow the cotton, building the factories and the equipment. And a lot of that we would probably also have to outsource because we don't have the materials to be able to create that at a high fashion. So he's advocating for something that we don't have the means to do. I actually looked this up in ChatGPT specifically about replacing federal income tax with tariffs. So don't take my word for it. Let's see what AI has to say for it. This is not to say that large language models are 100% fact or they're genius. In fact, as studies have shown, they're actually not very good at all. In slight variables of information, they don't work. They really just work on pattern recognition. So this goes to show you how stupid what he's saying is, that even a computer just focused on pattern recognition can recognize that this is something that's ridiculous. So it says a shift to high tariffs, especially near or at 100%, would likely lead to significant international trade tensions. Like I said, trading partners would likely retaliate with tariffs of their own, leading to a trade war. Is that something we need in the middle of countless proxy wars between Israel, Iran, Russia, and China? Supply chain disruption, like I mentioned, increased prices for consumers. So it's going to cost a lot to be able to try and make any of this happen in America. So in the short term, whereas a t-shirt would cost you $30, $60, hell, even $100, it's going to cost you $120, $300, and upwards of $500 if you want something made in the USA. And do you think wages are going to increase? Have they increased? And will a businessman like Trump increase them for you to afford a $300 t-shirt? So it says reindustrialization over time, incentivizes companies to shift production to the US, right? But it'll take some time for us to be able to do that through infrastructure and labor. We have to train more people to be able to use this kind of machinery. A lot of people don't want to work. I'm sure immigration will come up, so I won't bring up that just yet, but higher cost of living, inflation, trade war, limited choice for consumers. So you probably won't be able to get your exotic Asian ramen snacks or sodas. Good luck with literally anything that isn't native to America. Do you trust Donald Trump's administration to create a healthy flora, a healthy environment? In fact, in his first 100 days, he repealed endowment programs for natural preserves in Yellowstone, Redwood. This was something he did even before the Muslim ban, because he thought he should shrink government. Oh man, this is so crazy. The deeper you get into it, it really is like terrifying that he's even this close to the finish line. I guess it just goes to show you what kind of state the Republican Party is in. 47 minutes in, Trump is right? Their broken clock is right twice a day. There is a lot of waste in the government. There is a lot of fraud in the government. And that is his appeal. That is the crux of realpolitik and propaganda, though, is that you say something that on the surface is true, but your actions and intentions disguised behind it. So it's not something that we'll be able to address in the next 4 years. And that's a shame because we're wasting time explaining why you can't do 100% tariffs. This motherfucker just said that if you drop a cork in China, in a week it's in Los Angeles? What it is? In China, in a week, 2 weeks.
You take a little cork and put it there.
Somewhere an hour and 15 minutes in, they're having this conversation about the environment and environmental impact. And Trump is really just showing, again, the pathology of just how a businessman thinks. He's looking at all this from a business standpoint. He's looking at the bill and saying, well, we spend how much on what? Businessmen can only interpret the world through profit and revenue streams. So they don't understand that we spend money because we need to have an ecosystem, a healthy environment, habitat. We need to ensure that all Americans are getting clean water and having clean air. And he's thinking, but China's doing this and India's doing that. And so why can they do that? How this rings to me is someone who doesn't understand the detailed processes of why things work. So he doesn't care how they work, right? It's kind of like an ignorance of facts and ignorance of events. And so people who don't think about why we need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a month just to test the waters, why would we elect someone that doesn't respect people that do and doesn't respect the thought process that needs to go behind these sorts of things? This conversation shouldn't be about, is green energy important? Windmills, solar. The conversation should be, how do we make it work feasibly? We don't want a guy who looks at the environment with a price tag, because he's probably looking at you like that. His typical fear-mongering stuff about an hour and 43 minutes in. I have no comments on this. It's really old stuff at this point. I think everybody agrees with it. An hour and 50 minutes in, they're talking about the UFC as if we don't have an election in like a week, like a couple days. There's been this much talk about policy, a little bit about the tariffs. You can't bury windmills, something about Haitians and people in Congo. This is serious. We're going into pivotal times. We're in the midst of stagflation, a weird labor market, migrant crisis, all these things that are occurring. And we're playing sensational popularity contests. There's just such a great dissonance between, it's like cultural warfare on 3 levels, right? You have the candidates who are the 1%, 100%, versus us. And somehow they've been able to manipulate the horizontal dividing line and made it a vertical one. They've said, sorry for the camera, they divided this horizontal dividing line instead of the 1% and the 99%, and they've made it vertical. They've made it the left and the right. They've made it red versus blue. It's not this, it's this. It really, really is. So, yeah, both y'all like UFC, but y'all not sitting in the same sections. And that's the problem. There are parts where Joe Rogan really does show that he's like a great interviewer. What is this, episode 2219? You see 2,219 episodes and hundreds of thousands of hours of experience coming. He really is, he's staying on topic. Trump at minute 59, hour 59, Trump just handed him like some sort of infographic that he printed out. I guess his team printed out. So you see that there were materials that the team probably wanted to cover, facts that they wanted to talk about. And going back to my last point about how they weren't talking about policy, it looks like this might be on purpose on Joe Rogan's part. He kind of just wants to keep it interesting for his viewers. He doesn't want to get Trump, of all people, to get into a numerical, statistical fact thing, because then you'll have CBS and NBC picking it apart all day long. But yeah, so Trump tried to hand him this graph or whatever, and Joe just takes it and keeps going with his sentence. They're talking about RFK. They're talking about health. I'm still like about 2 hours in. And I think it's actually really interesting, right? Humor me. Let's talk about this. He says, "Oh yeah, the pharmaceutical industry, they're not going to be happy about me having RFK in the administration." Also, did they give RFK like what his official role would be? RFK Jr. Trump's cabinet. What did he said he'd be like the Minister of Health? So it says PBS published 2 weeks ago, not even October 15th. I'm recording this October 26th. It's undefined, actually. Even though RFK Jr. has endorsed Trump, Trump hasn't said what kind of role RFK will play. So RFK suggesting he will have a significant American agricultural policy. Why is that important? Because I was like, oh, that's interesting. Trump does run on this like anti-establishment type views, but we do know he has a lot of corporate ties and this and that. I don't really know how that goes. So to think that the pharmaceutical industry would want him to have RFK Jr., who, if you don't know, RFK Jr. is like a health conspiracy dude. Like, I mean, I won't say a lot of the things that he says is wrong, but it's true. A lot of like our food and drugs and water systems are poisoned, high levels of fluoride, high levels of asbestos, whatever the case may have you. And so this is where he comes in with the agriculture, healthy foods, 100% grass fed, whatever it is. RFK eats dogs. Look it up. How would that work? Maybe that is an authentic, streamlined part. Or is Trump just telling RFK Jr. whatever he wants to hear, this delusional buffoon, in my opinion, on RFK? If I'm just going to tell him anything he wants to hear so I can have him endorse me and I can take all of his candidates because I need all the help I can get to beat the Democrats. I have no faith that Trump will actually hire RFK. It's just funny how many people can be like fooled by this dude. I don't know. Sorry, RFK. 2 hours and 11 minutes in, Joe Rogan says in a lot of ways, and Trump agrees, that in a lot of ways, the mainstream media, the news, acts as, an extended promotional arm of the Democratic Party. And in a lot of ways, that's true, right? And we don't have to think of it like in nefarious or malicious ways. Now, it could be that there are strong ties between the Democratic National Convention and the Democratic Party money. And in most cases, that's probably true. I think it also finds itself that these people agree with these things, right? Think about the Stephen Colbert character, for start. He played a character that was like ironically a conservative Republican. He gave like the jokey views. He could have extended his career and spun off in a way where he just doubled down and actually believed that stuff. There is no mainstream political pundit comedian. He could have filled that role. Look at what Trump did with the Republican National Convention, with the Republican National Party. He joined them, right? Because it was opportunistic. 2 hours and 14 minutes in, I'm sure you can find a supercut of every media right-wing pundit saying the specific term, weaponizing the justice system, weaponizing the justice system. The Democrats, Hillary Clinton, Biden, they've weaponized the justice system for election interference to stop Trump and this and that. We should be skeptical of everyone using the exact term and phrase. It's almost as if everyone is exposed to the same sort of media. Everyone's exposed to the same narrative. Why weaponizing criminal justice? I don't know, the justice system. Never heard those three words used. These people are weaponizing the justice system. A very short word could be accountability. Oh, I think we just hit something. Where Trump victimizes himself a lot. What he's experiencing for the first time is really it's foreign to him. He's a New York City like builder. He's a New York City real estate guy. You can get a whole lot of connections because rich people from all over the world, famous people from all over the world want to get property or want to at least rent and get a condo in New York City. So here, though, in politics is a space that he couldn't crack, right? He's given the favors. He's trying to get the leverage. No one's kissing his ass. Could it be that this weaponizing that he's talking about is actually just a victimization because he's found himself in a situation where he can't business his way out of a criminal case? Maybe you also do deserve it. People are going to jail for crimes that they really didn't commit, how the criminal justice system is weaponized against them. So I don't really give a damn if it's like weaponized towards you, to be honest with you, because if you chose being a politician for your life, you would have had all the connections, you would have known all the judges to skirt accountability, just like a lot of these politicians do. I don't want it for them, and I don't want it for you either. So cry me a river. All right, 2 hours and 40 minutes. This is important. This is breaking news. Trump pretty much is saying if he loses again this time, he's out. He's done. If that his whole 3 hours should be the most important thing, the most swaying thing to let you know to vote, is that we are almost done with this. We're almost done with this completely. These Democrats, they just got to stay solid. If we vote, if we make this happen, he says it himself. He's bowing out. I'll use this to wrap out because I don't expect much in these last couple minutes of this conversation. The goal, the strategy, the only hope is to cause division. It's as simple as that. To make us divided, but the fact that he speaks simply, he makes shit look good, he makes shit sound good, he makes shit what we can understand. He talks about all these things in America that don't work well. That's Trump's strategy. What Trump has done, though, is he's aligned himself with the Republican Party. You have to take accountability for the fact that a lot of the good stuff that exists in this country, a lot of stuff that doesn't exist in this country doesn't exist because of Republicans. Because of the abuse of the filibuster, weaponized by Republicans to maintain control, to appease lobbyists, to maintain profit margins in small red states. This is why I love to bring up Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, because it's just the greatest example of the double talk of Republicans and how just every single day people align themselves to the Republican Party in hopes of being a big fish in a small pond, to get easy votes, to say whatever the case may be so you can end up winning 3 presidential nominations like Trump has. You know, I'm beginning to think that it isn't commentary on American people, isn't even commentary on, the culture of America as much it is a commentary of the Republican Party. Take this from a Knicks fan. I understand how weak the Eastern Conference was in the 10 years LeBron's went to the final. All he had to face was the Toronto Raptors every year. Maybe like 1 year he had to face Chicago and oops, Derrick Rose got injured. But there is a strategy of going to a weaker conference so you can make sure you can get yourself to the finals. That's what Trump's done. And I really need the Republican Party. No, seriously, I need the Republican Party to get serious. Okay, because at one point y'all stood for something. And now you're just selling the seat to a businessman, the highest bidder. Right now, it's a real estate broker, right? In 16 years, it's going to be Elon Musk himself. It's every single day people align themselves to the Republican Party in hopes of being a big fish in a small pond, to get easy votes, to say whatever the case may be so you can end up winning 3 presidential nominations like Trump has. You know, I'm beginning to think that it isn't commentary on American people, isn't even commentary on the culture of America as much it is a commentary of the Republican Party. The Republican Party at whole that is putting this whole country into crisis. And they're voting against FEMA funding. They're voting against FDA funding. They're voting against all these things that come election time, they will tell you that it's all the Democrats' fault because they don't expect you to know how democracy works. They don't expect you to understand that largely a lot of the stuff, you can't blame just a single one person. You can't blame just a single one party. It's a very complex system that doesn't work perfectly because it's meant to work slow, because it has monstrous effects on people, big impact on people. You look at the strike, just one strike at one port in America would have shut down billions of dollars a day of money coming into America. That's why they shut down that longshoresman strike. A lot of Americans have existed and lived in America while America was really fucking awesome. So we really take for granted these mechanisms that have allowed this to 1, take place, 2, propagate, and 3, maintain itself for over 50 years. It hasn't been great, but it hasn't been horrible. Okay. And that's a very important thing for it. It hasn't been great, but it ain't been Sudan. It hasn't been fucking North Korea, wherever, you know? This is a person that doesn't understand that. This is a person that was given like $500,000 or $2 million to start a business when he was born through inheritance and lived in New York City. And so real estate was cool. And he was sociopathic enough to be able to just get to where he needs to get. And he hired well enough to get people with cameras to lie to you and to manipulate how you're feeling up into the point that he can just buy a Republican nomination for the presidency. The most promising thing I've heard in these last, 900 minutes, he wants to give up. He's ready to give up. He's giving it his last best shot. And if he gets it, he ain't giving it up this time. Yeah, they said a little bit earlier, oh, he was in prison for 4 years. It wasn't a dictatorship then. You had January 6th, like Joe, you don't remember January 6th? He ends this kind of explaining like his main policy shift, right? And it's just kind of like his whole spiel, which is like making America great again and all that, and bringing factories and all that sounds well and good. All that sounds like it's plausible if we weren't in the midst of globalization, if we weren't in the midst of China being as strong as they possibly could, and the formation of BRICS, right? Gold backed, all of these nutrient rich countries coming together, making their own kind of trade currency. If we were to start a trade war in the middle of the development of BRICS, I think that's just like the transition point that all these countries need to get off their dependency off the dollar. Oh, I can't trade here anyway? Well, damn, fuck it. And they want me to think that, and they think, Trump thinks that I'm going to come and build my factory here for him for free. Yeah, the hell right. That's why he brings up, oh, all of our semiconductors, all of our smart chips are made in Taiwan. Well, that's why we made the manufacturing bill in the first place, you goddamn idiot. Taiwan is actually building a factory. So they kind of took your idea, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, we actually are building a semiconductor factory. And I know because I have stock in TSMC. So I'm making financial decisions. Yeah, and that's probably the case why we tried to exit the trade war to try and ease tensions with China, who is so close and could probably take Taiwan if they really wanted to. They probably just don't want to spend the money and get in trouble with us and kind of affect the business relationships that we have. You know, so it's pretty complex. These are complex things. And I think at the end of this conversation, what we learn is that it's a bit too complex to be held on a platform like Joe Rogan, like the Brilliant Idiots, like whatever may have you. And Trump wants that, right? Trump wants to bring down the critical thinking level, the intellectualism, the experience, honestly. You know, it's not about being like divergent in thought. I'm sure politics has a lot of divergent thinkers. They just don't get the shine. They don't get the money or the funding. And that's a completely different situation. Under 8% of people vote in local elections. Maximum 30% of the population vote in presidential elections. So when I say like we do this to ourselves, and when I say we're privileged, we do not take advantage of our biggest power in democracy. Votes are free. If you're a homeless man with an ID, if you're dead broke, you never had a job, your opinion matters, right? You have a vote, and look at these politicians. They spend so much money trying to win you over. Trump knows that if he makes it a muddy fight, if he brings it down a couple rungs on the ladder and he argues at this sensational tabloid level, he thinks that it's a fight that he can win. But yeah, so what do we gain from this podcast? Not a whole, I mean, honestly, like at a different level, we got like the personal stuff. It's a great opportunity to hear from like a former president who would probably tell secrets, who shot JFK. What's the deal with aliens? They said Kamala will be on Club Shay Shay. I don't think it'll be as dope as this conversation, but hopefully it is. We'll see. Let's make a deal. How about I show up for this one? Right? Sound good? All right, cool. Thank you. Have a good one.